Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video. Check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you would like to enjoy this as an audio-only experience. Trying to hit 150k subs over here, so that subscription would be much appreciated. We are back with hot takes. Let's get right into it. From old school handles, people love to act like Steph dragged a bunch of scrubs to the 2022 title, but it's just lazy revisionism. Wiggins and Draymond were both all-stars, with Draymond anchoring the defense, Wiggins playing elite two-way ball. Clay still made shots at a high clip, and Poole was electric off of the bench. Steph was phenomenal, no doubt, but pretending he did it solo disrespects a complete and well-coached squad. I do think it can be over exaggerated. I also would say it's probably the worst supporting cast for any of the championships of the 2020s. It's like that, or would it be Denver? It's not Boston, it's not OKC, it's not the Lakers, I don't think it's the Bucks. So yeah, it's either the Warriors or the Nuggets are the worst core around their superstar player of the 2020s. So just in terms of recent memory stuff, I can see how that gets pushed into like a carrying scrubs argument, but everything you said here is true. Jordan Poole was really good off of the bench. There are people who act like Jordan Poole always sucked, but no, Jordan Poole was pretty fucking phenomenal in that six-man role. Andrew Wiggins was pretty damn consistent. Clay was extremely inconsistent, but at the very least, his three-point shot was mostly there. And I mean, Draymond's defense has always been something that was present here. I think it kind of just gets neglected in the entire conversation about the Warriors, especially in recent years, because he still manages to regularly keep them as a pretty good team on that end of the floor. I do, like I said, I don't think it's the best squad, and also when you compare it to the other championships Steph has, it is easily the worst squad that he had for any of his individual championships. So because of it being one of the weaker squads to win a title in recent years and the weakest one that he won a championship with in his career, I understand how the, recency bias. I understand how the recency bias led people to be like, that team's full of scrubs. But if you want to say that team's full of scrubs, dude, go back 10 years, there's way more teams that are full of scrubs than that. From Saxophone, just like there are coaches who are floor raisers, there are coaches who are ceiling raisers. Ceiling raisers are coaches that'll make an already good team great or make a great team a championship winner, but they struggle making a bad team decent, and they don't develop young talent as well. A classic example of a ceiling raiser is Steve Kerr. Yeah, I felt like a big issue that Steve Kerr had in some of those down years was that he was kind of unwilling to waver from the Warrior system that won them a championship, because they were like, well, that system works, that system brought us a championship, you know, we feel good about that. The thing is, it's different when bad players are running that system, and a big frustration that I had with Steve Kerr during those years is there was time where Steph Curry was just kind of the only offensive option they had, and yet they were still letting complete scrubs spend a majority of the time dribbling during the possession. And I recognize Steph is the greatest off-ball scorer in the history of the game, and you should always do that, but I do think the scales needed to be tipped more towards the on-ball creation, especially because Steph was better at it at that point in his career. So yes, not particularly great at adjusting to the different circumstances, and I would say the yin to Steve Kerr's yang is Tom Thibodeau. Tom Thibodeau can take a team with subpar talent and make them pretty fucking good. He can also cap the ceiling of a team that's good that could be great. Like, I think his time with the New York Knicks demonstrated that exactly. Like, when he first went there, Julius Randle, and I can barely even remember any of the key players on the team. RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, I think Mitchell Robinson was actually like in his first year there, but like, it was not a good team, not by any stretch of the imagination, and yet he got them to the playoffs for the first time since 2013, 2014. By the time we get to 2025, and they have a starting lineup that features Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, and OG Anunoby, one of the more talented top 4 cores in the entire NBA. At that point, he was limiting them because they had so much offensive versatility and capability that was just being simply chalked up to give the ball to Jalen Brunson and hopefully it works out. And that is frustrating for a lot of reasons. I understand why they fired him as a result, but I can understand how that can be confusing if you're like, he brought us to the playoffs for the first time. He's kind of a big part of the reason we're even here. How do we fire him? Well, if you want to go further at a certain point, the man just had limitations that they could not get over besides for moving on. Let me highlight this real quick. Yes, the one I'm 1,000% sure Bron has a no trade. Yes, every once in a while I forget some important shit like this. Unfortunately, I do not have the best memory, and every time it happens, I feel like a complete jackass. But yes, LeBron had a no trade clause. I forgot that facet of it. I still do think a trade would have been plausible. I don't know if the Lakers really pushed for it as hard as they could have, but I also don't know where LeBron's head was at. So it's a real shame that society has made it almost a guaranteed death wish to talk about politics/social issues, especially when it's someone's own opinion and not bought. I'm glad Rusty hasn't changed his views for the sake of being politically disliked. Yes, I'm just jumping off of this tangent from the last one. We don't got to keep going into politics and these hot takes. I didn't really mean for it to bleed over, but it has happened. The thing is, I understand why everything is so tense because it's all super serious stuff. It's a completely different set of circumstances talking about politics than it is talking about basketball, although sometimes, weirdly enough, you can get just as much vitriol for basketball opinions as you do political ones, but like, I think it is good to share what you believe and who you are, even if you're wrong, because at least you're forthright about it. But that's just me. I'm going to move on. Jerry West actually deserved his finals MVP, and he is still the only player ever to actually deserve a losing team's finals MVP. The numbers he put up in that series are absolutely ridiculous. He had to drop 40 points a game for them to win. Also, Hondo fell off in game 5 and 6. Thus, I have Jerry over him. Who the hell doesn't have Jerry? Oh, you're talking about for that award. It's like everybody has Jerry West over Hondo all time. What? People bring Jerry West's name into conversations to say LeBron deserved finals MVP in 2015 or 18, but even if his numbers are good in 18, he got swept, but Jerry led them to a game 7. In 2015, LeBron shot below 50% from the field. Yeah, if I was going to make any argument, it would be for 15. It would be for 18 LeBron, not 15 LeBron. I think he only got that award because of the fact that it was a brand new award and there wasn't really the precedent established that you have to strictly give it to the winner. It is interesting. I kind of wish we upheld that where we don't have to give it to the winner. But I also wouldn't say there's many instances where I would have given it. I will say I would have given the 2015 MVP to LeBron over Iguodala. Like, no offense to Iggy, because he was good. He had a phenomenal series, elevated his game significantly. Being inserted in the starting lineup definitely changed the tide of that series in many ways, but it should have gone to Steph very easily, and I'd give it to LeBron before I give it to Iggy, to be honest. From Azagoran, when teams have a consistent history of injuries, say like the Pelicans or Sixers, the NBA should do an internal investigation into the medical staff to make sure that there's not malpractice or mistakes being made, like the intern with Embiid. For context, if you did not know this, Joel Embiid, after he sustained I believe it was a foot injury I think he was actually dealing with this injury going into the draft, and it's the reason he wasn't picked higher. But Joel Embiid had a foot injury going into the NBA, and a fucking intern was responsible for overseeing his recovery. And throughout the course of the year, he was like, hey, I don't think I'm getting better. My foot still feels bad. And then like a year later, they finally do an evaluation. They're like, yeah, no, you were right. Nothing has healed in the last year. That just insane story. They may find nothing, and hopefully it wouldn't be like a Tim Donaghy investigation where Stern said everything's fine, we looked into it, but it's something that should be checked on. If all of our players keep getting injured, would perhaps relieve some of the fan base concerns as well. I think we talked about this on a Discord hot takes. If you want to get a more likely to be responsible responded to taken here, go ahead and subscribe to our Patreon to get access to the Rusty Buckets Discord. A lot of fun conversations in there. We were talking, I talked about this, someone made a take about this, and I was like, think medical staffs in the NBA are just kind of inherently compromised because they work for the franchise, not the player. And that is kind of an impossible conflict of interest that you do not want to have in the medical practice. And I really don't think there's any way to avoid it, only the degree of malpractice associated. But like, you know, regular doctors will not be like, yeah, let's shoot your leg up with a bunch of painkillers, and you walk out there with just like this zombified leg that you have to keep putting pressure on, like stuff like that. Like a normal doctor doesn't recommend that. So, but also I understand there needing to be a degree of playing through stuff. Like I understand that, but man, Joel in this article, and we're doing, that'll be out before this, my video about Joel Embiid, so go check that out if you have not already. The amount of times that he was made to play through injury and the amount of times that caused further injury or delayed recovery, like it's a constant theme throughout his career. Yeah, I especially think like the Kawhi situation with the Spurs, I think that was also mentioned in the Discord comment. I always will be on Kawhi's side, and I will always be on the player's side because nobody is in their body besides for them. It's possible that someone's lying about dealing with pain and injury. You don't get to assume the worst in people because some of the worst people exist. You know what I mean? That's not a good way to look at it. And yeah, telling someone that their body is not feeling the way that it is when you're not in their body, it's baffling to me that is so commonplace and so accepted. Like it's not the most outlandish shit in the world. Like it's not the most making a baseless assumption type of take. That shit pisses me off. But yeah, I agree with you. But I also, part of me feels like there shouldn't even be team medical staffs, at least not ones that are responsible for like the major stuff, like the recovery timeline. Like if you want to have medical staff for smaller stuff that happens day to day, I understand that, but like there's just too much of a conflict of interest. I think they should be able to work strictly with doctors who are not employed by the organization that they're, you know, trying to recover from an injury for. From Yanan, the only reason people have contempt for this 1960s NBA calling it a plumber era is because this era doesn't have high quality footage and mostly no footage at all. If it had extensive colored HD footage and it was available online, the newer generations of fans would be enjoying and appreciating that era, particularly the epic rivalries of the Celtics and Lakers and Russell versus Wilt. It's a classic example of how at the end of the day, visuals are everything. I am a big believer in the power of aesthetics and how much it matters. However, there is no amount of film grain that is hiding the fact that dudes are dribbling like cardboard cutouts. I do understand a lot of that is as a result of the rules, but just like kind of the fluidity of athletes in the way that you move in basketball has just been developed over the years. And earlier on, it looked like everybody was a fish out of water. It does straight up look like uncoordinated ass YMCA basketball a lot of the time. That is because the game is new. That is because literally by 1960, I think the first jump shot was invented in like the 1948. So jump shots have existed for 12 years. Like it's new invention, new stuff, new rules, constant, ever changing. Like, and also like it is the plumber era because most players other than the stars were doing other shit because being a 12th man on a roster was not exactly going to set you up with generational wealth. There's a lot of factors. The footage definitely hurts. It's not the only reason. A major reason, if you even want to say it's the most major reason, I wouldn't argue with you, but I can't agree with only reason. The game was developed less. I've watched about as much 1960s basketball as you can. As you mentioned, there's very little footage of it, but I've also seen I think film being upgraded. You know how film can be improved over the years. Film of like the finals from like the early 70s. I think the Knicks versus Lakers in 1971. I believe I've seen I've definitely seen a full game from that finals that was like HD as fuck. And it does make it different. It's interesting as hell. It's weird to see it so similarly to what it actually looked like at the time. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting how that works though in general. I think about that a lot with like how you'll see like footage or images of Martin Luther King, color photos, and then black and white photos. And like when you see the color photos, first of all, dude had that shit on. He underrated, king of fits, among other things. MLK could get a fucking fit off. But also, I do think genuinely there is an effort to put forth the black and white photos more than the color photos that look more true today, you know, to look just like any of us. Like, I don't know, this sounds conspiratorial, but I'm not the only one who's had this take that like intentionally using the older, grainier footage and photos and stuff makes it feel more distant in the past. Like a black and white photo from the 60s feels like it's from like 150 years ago, not 80 years ago. Am I dumb? 40, 60 years ago. Yeah, I've made myself look a fool. I'm going to move on. I do want to hit this one real fast so the video is not too long. I don't want to go into all your explanation, but the Jokic is the only star that has the mentality of a role player. No, Chris Bosh and Tim Duncan, Draymond Green, Al Horford. Like there's a good handful of examples of stars that have superstars. Tim Duncan is still there though. So still Tim Duncan. So no. From Will Bishop, not sure how hot this is, but this is what I have for you. When it's all said and done, Giannis will be ranked higher all time than Durant. I already have Giannis higher than Durant. He has more MVPs. He has a defensive player of the year, and he won a championship as by far and away the best player on that team, when it was far from a guarantee that he would win that championship, and it wasn't just the easiest possible title you could get. Not that Durant's titles don't count, but my number one thing that factors in for me when it comes to ranking all-time greats is winning a championship as the number one option, and like a clear-cut number one is like definitely the best player. I think Stephen Curry was the best player both of the years that Kevin Durant won finals MVP. One of the finals KD was better, the other he wasn't, and it should have gone to Steph. But either way, Giannis, I have him over KD because of my own personal criteria. I don't think it's crazy at all to have it the other way around, but I think Giannis is already over him, and he will be further over him by the time his career is done. From Coffee Cup, okay, fuck you, what is this name? From Coffee Cup Coffee. No one type of person should be best at basketball analysis because everyone involved with the game, players, coaches, analysts, commentators, fans, all have a different viewpoint on what the game is. Even with ex-players, there are massive differences in the mindset of what makes an NBA player good between an ex-defensive specialist and an ex-offensive all-star. We need to stop treating one group of people in this space as if their opinion matters more than everyone else. I also think putting so much weight into like who is allowed to have opinions is a waste of time, more so than just addressing whatever opinion is being expressed. You know what I mean? A lot of the time I'll have a take and the pushback is, you haven't played organized and professional basketball, so what do you know? And it's like, okay, but is my take terrible? Can you explain why my take is bad other than making fun of me? A lot of people just go that route, or rather than addressing an argument, they go, that's ridiculous, you don't know ball, and move on with your life. It's like, you don't win the interaction when you do that, and it's stupid. All right, from Isaacs, not only is Kareem vastly overrated, but I'd argue he's not even a top 3 big ever. The majority of his scoring came in an era that I'd argue is the weakest in history. Yet for some reason he doesn't get the similar treatment that Wilt does, and he only won 1 ring during that time span. I get that he didn't have much help, but look at someone like Hakeem, who won a ring in a much tougher era with little help. 95 he had Clyde, so I'm not considering that one fully in this argument, but you certainly could. You also could point out that Michael Jordan was not playing the 2 years that he won a title. That was pretty convenient. Hakeem was the most well-rounded big ever, arguably the greatest defensive defensive player ever, certainly miles ahead of Kareem, arguably the best post game ever, and won 2 of the touchiest rings ever. Russell dominated his era, maybe the greatest defender ever, and his impact goes far beyond the basketball court. I get he had a lot of help, but he was the anchor of that team, and without him, they might not have won any rings. And a bonus, in a prior video, you mentioned how he helped mitigate Wilt's numbers head to head. Duncan, leader of maybe the best dynasty in NBA history, elite defender who sacrificed his numbers for the greater good of the team. His 2003 ring is far more impressive than any of Kareem's, playing in the toughest conference ever, the 2000s West. And he has 5 rings, just 1 less than Kareem. And as you've said before, Duncan's help is vastly overrated compared to Kareem's. It's not close. And while I don't agree one could easily say Shaq is greater based on peak ability and Jokic based on all-around game, I just find it odd how people just pencil in Kareem as the 3rd or 2nd greatest player, and if you disagree, it means you're a casual, when there's very valid arguments for all players I've listed above. Part of this for Kareem is like, when you're doing your basketball rankings, are you just doing strictly basketball career, like all-time great basketball players, or NBA? I am not factoring in college or high school careers in any capacity when I am doing all-time rankings. I am strictly worried about what you did in the National Basketball Association. And with that, a lot of the things you said are true. He did play in a pretty talent weak era, and he only won one championship while doing that. Now, Kareem also did not have very good teams, and the thing about the 70s is that it's very similar to what we have right now in the NBA, where a lone superstar is not really able to just carry you to the promised land in the same way that you were able to do that. Now, Rick Barry did it in 1975. Pretty much every other championship that was won in the 70s came from a pretty deep team, even if it's not deep in the sense of having like 10 good players, because it's pretty impossible to have 10 actually really good players back then. I guess scaled down it's possible, but more like, you know, a great starting lineup, like a well-rounded, well-versed team. Like the Celtics were like that. The Seattle Supersonics in 79 were like that. The Trailblazers were like that. Like just squads of like 3 to 4 great players, where Kareem, for a lot of it was him by himself with a bunch of and then there was Oscar Robertson. I want to say there was also Dave DeBusschere. Is that the right one? Nope, that's a Detroit Piston. Who am I thinking of? There was somebody else in there. 1971 Milwaukee. Where are you? Bob Dandridge. That is not Dave DeBusschere. But Bob Dandridge, yes. Good defensive player, multiple time All-Star. And he was there for basically all of his tenure in Milwaukee. However, he was not like All-Star caliber until after the championship window had already passed. So yeah, I mean, I think he definitely could have had more ideal circumstances, and it's not necessarily his fault, but he was also by far and away the best player in the NBA. In fact, it was the biggest gap in the best player in the league conversation ever, even bigger than like peak LeBron, because at least like Kevin Durant and Kobe were trailing him in that conversation by 2010. So I don't know. The other thing is, like, his peak is not long. It's not short by any means. Not short. Believe me, I'm not trying to suggest as much, but like he spends a large portion of his career being like a 23 point per game guy. 1980, the Lakers win a championship. 1981, he averages 26 points per game. After that, mind you, there are 4 more championships to be added to his resume from this point in his career. He averages 19 points and 7 rebounds and 1.7 blocks on 56% shooting for those remaining 8 years. So 4 championships, averaging like 19. I can also go through and I'll just filter the stats for the second championship to the fifth one in the Lakers era. Yeah, 21.7 rebounds, 2.2 blocks, 53% from the field. Don't get me wrong, those are still solid numbers, but people act like he was a superstar on the Lakers in the Showtime era for more of it than he wasn't. No, he was a superstar for like 2 to 3 years while Magic Johnson was there, and then Magic Johnson was clearly the best player on the team from that point. So yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you on Kareem being overrated. However, I wouldn't say he's not a top 3 big. I would say he might not have a top 3 peak. I would take Hakeem in his peak. I would take Shaq in his peak, and Tim Duncan, I feel like I'm kind of tied with Tim Duncan on there. I think Tim Duncan's fine, but you could pick Tim if you wanted to. If you wanted to say Jokic at his absolute peak is a little better, I'm fine with that. It's extremely weird when you're comparing eras. I really kind of hate it, but I don't know that's what these videos are for. Completely useless conversations that don't contribute anything important. All right, for the last hot take of the video, when it is all said and done, Draymond Green will go down as the most underrated player in NBA history, a certified top 5 defender of all time that anchored the defense of 4 title teams and the winningest regular season team of all time. He also is one of the best screen setters and defensive playmakers ever, and is just as influential to the way the game is played as Steph is. The increase in spacing and pick and roll offense over the last 10 years is largely due to how successful his play style was. When people say that Steph's shooting changed the game, they neglect the fact that his shooting was only as effective as it was because of the play style that was built around him. I think you're giving that a little bit too much credit, but it's not entirely wrong. People rightfully credit legends like Magic Johnson, who challenged the idea of a conventional point guard by being 6'9". Meanwhile, 6'6" Draymond could play power forward through center and guard 1 through 5 with ease. Being both an elite perimeter and rim defender, he is also much better offensive talent than people give him credit for due to his playmaking and overall basketball IQ. Yet people tend to have him out of the top 50 conversations because he doesn't put up gaudy scoring numbers. If players like Jokic and Steph, who are elite offensively and decent defensively, can be thrown into all-time conversations, why can't players who are elite defensively and decent offensively? Well, I'll tell you the answer to the last one, because defense is not as hard as offense. Very simply, being an all-time great offensive player is a lot harder than being an all-time great defensive player. Not that either of them are easy, but like being an all-defensive guy and being a all-NBA guy are dramatically different accomplishments for different tiers of players. So here's the thing. Draymond's as good defensively as it's possible to be, especially with his size. He plays way beyond his limited size. Like he is to defense what Steph is to offense. The way that Steph changed the way that offense is played, Draymond changed the way that defense is played. And I think he is one of the like 5 most influential, important defenders who has ever played the game of basketball. I think he has a case for being a top 5 defender ever, period. And I do agree with you that he is a severely underrated player, but as to why he can be so underrated, well, first of all, he's a dick, so that doesn't help. He's incredibly unlikable. I have for many years been a Draymond Green the player defender and the man criticizer, and I will continue to go that way because I'm separating the two. Draymond has done everything in his power to make people call him overrated by being just the most dickish man alive, and that's on him, frankly. Like, I can't really get too mad and push back against it because I'm like, yeah, I understand hating Draymond Green, but in terms of his defensive impact, I do hope that you are right that he will get remembered more for this a little bit over time. I think he will. History tends to filter out the ugly stuff and you just remember mostly the good shit, at least as it pertains to basketball. So I think that'll happen with Draymond. Also, he's over Klay Thompson all time, and that shouldn't even be a question. For some reason it is, because people just have such a remarkable scoring bias. But yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.